Today's episode of Running It Back is here. It's ready. You're going to love it. Recording this on a rainy day here on the West Coast. I don't know about you, but drivers seem to be a little bit more on edge when it's raining. We don't quite know what to do. We don't quite know how to react. We're messing with knobs on our car that we've never used before. The defroster button. We don't know what that is. So if you're out there driving in the car in the rain, just chill, just a little bit. Today on the show, Mikey Mckernan joins me. Mikey is a comic based right here in Los Angeles. I've known Mikey for a while. However, I've never really gotten a chance to talk with him at length. Mikey also does a video blog about his comedy performances, comedy experiences, past and present, which is really cool. We talk about how he started that, how he got into that, what motivated him to get into that as well. Not to mention, we play the Rotten Tomatoes head-to-head movie game, especially themed for Mikey as well. What is that theme? Well, you're going to have to listen to it because you are going to love it. Really cool interview, really cool guy. You should check him out. So, without further delay, here is my interview with Mikey Mckernan. Check it out. Joining me today is friend and comedian Mikey Mckernan. Mikey, I haven't seen you in forever, although I think we've crossed paths about 10,000 times. But we haven't ever actually got to chat.
No, man. How are you, Patrick? I appreciate you having me on, dude. Great to see you, pal.
It's great to see you, too. You are one of the faces of the million open mics we go to, one of the faces I see, and you just instantly be like, all right, we can have a fun mic tonight. You're always happy. You're always positive. You're one of the people whose names gets pulled from buckets and the room of comics starts clapping because they want to see you go up. They enjoy you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. That was actually the nicest and probably the most honest answer that people always say, or that someone has said, because people always say, this guy's a legend in the scene. And I'm like, open mic legend. Will you get that correct, please? Okay. So yeah, thank you. I try to be a happy guy. You know, I've been doing it for so damn long and it's a brutal business. And when I was coming up, all the veterans, they hated, any kind of newer comic or stuff like that, because they're just like, oh, another name in the bucket, another name on the list. So I try to be happy, especially since this is not a happy medium.
Well, let's start with that. There are many tiers in the comedy world. There is, like, I think as a casual fan, we all know the comic you see on TV, the comic you see on late night TV. We all follow the comics who are bouncing around the country doing clubs. And then there's a level of comic that I would say where you start, but it seems like that level has grown from where you start to where you middle to where you almost progress from, because the open mic circuit is huge now. There is not a club system anymore where you do open mics for a while, you get out of that, you do hosting for a while, you get to middle for a while. It seems like that is shrunk, and now it goes from open mic, plug away, go to everything you possibly can. And that's how you craft yourself these days. I've been at it for a long time too. Tell me if my assessment is right or wrong, but it seems like here where we both live in Los Angeles this is how you slug it out, is you go to the clubs and you just do open mics. What has been your experience for you in that regard, or has it changed over the years?
No, you're about right. For one, it's Los Angeles. So it's one of the meccas, of the entertainment industry. And when it comes to stand-up, it's one of the second ones, it's New York or LA. So much comedy is here. Comedy does not take a night off in Los Angeles. Only you do. So the whole point is that I have to be on this grind. I have to be out. I have to be doing as much as I can. I got to be writing as much as I can. And so it's so hard. And that is kind of like, yes, I do agree with your assessment, because it's being relevant nowadays, and it's like, you have to just kind of be around. But when it really comes down to it, is that you really, really have to write and perform and enjoy it more than anything. You really, really have to enjoy this. You can't you think about, when you first start stand-up comedy, you're like, oh my gosh, I'm the next Will Ferrell, or I'm gonna be the next Bill Burr, tomorrow. But it takes years. It takes so many years to do it. So did I answer that correctly?
It definitely does. No, you hit on it with the work ethic portion of it. And I think we all understand that you have to put in a lot of time. Every once in a while, something comes along or somebody comes along that seems to jump to the front of the line. And of course, that drives you nuts, because it throws off the work ethic approach to it. But
Yeah.
such is life. Life is not fair. Nothing always equals out. So it's the same thing in the open mic world. If I were to describe it to people, because I have friends and stuff who are not comics, or have you ever met somebody and you're trying to describe to them what the stand-up scene is like, and as you're describing it to them halfway through, you're like, God damn it, this sounds horrible.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Especially in the beginning.
Very much so.
Well, my favorite thing to say is people are like, hey, how's comedy going? And I tell them the truth. I say comedy sucks.
Oh, interesting. Wow, you just straight up tell them it sucks.
Yeah, and you tell them all this because, for one, you have to you really, got to learn early on, people are going to get things, especially, over you, and it's going to happen every single day. You're going to look on social media every single day and see it. So somehow you have to be better above that.
You really do, and it's easy to get sidetracked because there is no sophomore, junior, senior. No. It's just everybody go over here, and then periodically one of you guys will get plucked out of here.
Yeah, timing is everything. And especially in Los Angeles, it's such an isolated medium. So you make friends, when you're thinking about how oh, I'm going to get such a funny act that I can start, maybe hosting and then middling. But you got to, in LA, there's some of the biggest clubs in the world. So you got to hang out there as much as you possibly can. Or if you can't get that, you go and you find your own stuff. Like right now, everybody wants to put on their own show in LA. That's because they can't, it's not they can't, but they might not be getting booked enough and they want to be doing more. So they literally just go, you know what? Forget it. I'm going to start my own show. Not with the idea of, oh, this venue, this neighborhood, my social life, all could be benefited from me putting on a comedy show. Most of that is not, the reason why they want to do it. The one reason is because I want to, have a show. I want to be in charge of my own stage time, and I want to start, booking funny comedians, or maybe start trading spots and stuff like that. So, and it sucks because in LA, this, there's really no crowds for stand-up comedy. Yes, people go see stand-up comedy shows all the time, and there's full rooms. They go see the best in the world. They live here. So for us young guns, when we're trying to make a name for ourselves, we really, really have to be social beings. We have to have multiple social groups because you get so caught into this environment and this scene that you're like, yeah, I do stand-up comedy all the time because it's every night, so I'm thinking about comedy. I'm not even living a real life. It's rare that I hang out with my friends. When I have to explain stand-up comedy to my friends, we sound like a bunch of maggots, hanging around spots, smoking, drinking outside, pissing off all the paid people, or the nice environment that they usually have there. So it's so hard to put all that together.
It's definitely, I describe it as the most blue collar version of the entertainment industry, because you hit on one thing. It's very entrepreneurial. It's, I think in 20 years from now, we'll all say, you know how you could do stand-up comedy 20 years ago? You go do something other than stand-up comedy, and then you come back, and then they'll let you do stand-up comedy. You go make your own podcast, your own YouTube show. You go do something else. Yeah, you become an influencer, and then they'll say, yeah, come on, do stand. It's the most backwards form of starting to do some form of entertainment. Let's break it down for those who don't know what an open mic is in Los Angeles, because I've done open mics in other cities, and they're greatly different than Los Angeles. Here in Los Angeles, you go, let's say we want to go to one of the big clubs. We go to the Improv. We go to their open mic, and let's say an estimate of 50 people plus want to go up on open mic. You sign your name on a little ticket, you put it in a big tin bucket, and for about an hour and a half, they just choose names at random because it's the most fair way to do it. And most people will not get up, and some will get up. and you will do your stand up for everybody who signed up in the bucket. And that's your that's your open mic. It is comedy boot camp because every name that gets picked up, everybody's upset that it's not their name and no one wants to laugh, but that is how we are doing it right now. How do you feel at these open mics? Do you feel it is a progression? Do you learn from it? Do you enjoy it? Do you have a hard time with it? What are your thoughts?
There's so many things, like all of those things you said, they're all in there. And it's really, really hard because, you think like, oh, the Hollywood Improv, this is going to be the best open mic in town. Technically it is because, they watch and they can actually give out really great opportunities, but room full of comics who are so mad because they're like, I can do that. So it's not a good room. So it's actually one of the tougher rooms to do. And for me, I'm at a point where I don't watch the open mics. I stand outside. I'm a smoker. I like to hang out in the hallway and, jib jab and be myself because I've put in so much years of, waiting for my name to get picked. And it's just really hard for other people because you want to sit in the room and be like, yeah, I'm into this. But we are so stuck in our heads that, I can't watch people go up and bomb or crush because I'm going to be like, oh gosh, that's going to happen to me when they bomb. Or if they crush, I'm like, I'm not going to be able to do that. So you're always kind of doubting. So I have to like get out of myself and go really be who I am with hanging out with like friends and, colleagues that I know around the scene. So that's like, I've always, there was a point where I would get picked on because, oh, you're not supporting the room, blah, 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 but when you think about it, you really, really want to be who you are, fluid, being funny, joking with friends. And then you got to go up there. So you're like, okay, this is the mode I want to be in compared to you're in the room. You're so like worried about that side laughing or, like, oh, the host has brought up like two, people who've bombed and stuff like that. So it's kind of tough, but you should always watch because people who want to start doing comedy, I say, go to one open mic, comedy open mic, and don't sign up. Just watch. And if you feel, because if you truly want to do it, you're going to be like, you know what, I can do that, or I'm funnier than that last guy, or whatever. And that is like the best advice, or like the best, training, because people think about like, oh, do I need to go and do classes? I say, no, you go to open mics. Okay. Yeah. There's no teachers. Everybody thinks they're a teacher, but you're going to learn everything. So, but it's very important to be active. You got to go, you got to show face, and you got to try to me, I love hitting up every single mic that I've never done before because I just want the experience to be like, yeah, no, I went there. It was dog crap. It was a good, nobody listened, or it was all comics, or there's other spots where it's like, yeah, it was a brewery. There's real audience members. It's free. Yeah. It's a bucket. You might not get picked, but hey, why do you want to go do these mics that are happening in town where you got to pay 5 minutes for a room full of comics for 1 hour that it's not really engaging? You just kind of, get the jokes out, like why waste time on that where you can actually find some real audience members. So the mic scene it's up and down. It's gotten a lot better this year. And obviously that has a lot to do with, the spirit of humanity, in my opinion. Everybody's kind of coming back and stuff like that. Like, the East Side scene is back to normal. So it's, that's when, comedy is around. And I bring that up because those are the individuals that you don't really find hanging out at the club open mics. They're not really, grinding late nights at hitting all the spots. They kind of stick to their part of town.
Right.
Do a lot of shows with their friends, kind of more of a supportive environment.
Yeah. You hit on a couple of things. Hanging out in the room can be very tough.
It's hard.
You hang there because you have to remember too, we have seen everybody there. We're all friends with everybody. We know everybody's act inside and out. So hanging out there, you get in that mindset like, okay, somebody bombed. Okay, I can do better than that. Yeah. And then someone does good and you're like, oh, I don't know if I can do that good. Oh, I got to go up. And all you do is essentially talk to yourself for an hour 15. And you talk yourself out of what you came there to do. And in some people, it seems like they're enjoying it as well. I would do this at that same improv mic. Remember, they would have it on Sunday nights and it would start at about 9 p.m. and go to midnight. It would go crazy late.
Sometimes.
It would go to 1 a.m. sometimes on a Sunday night. And I would sit there and I'm like, all right, I'm leaving at 10. I'm leaving at 10:30. And at some point I would bribe myself with food. I was like, all right, you make it till midnight. You can get drive-through on the way home.
Hilarious.
I would bribe myself to sit there and at least stare at my notebook and try and write something or try and get something out of the time.
Hilarious.
But I'm sitting there in a hard seat. My butt hurts. You're there all night. You're thinking about what time you have to work the next day. And you're like, all right, you came all the way over here and now you want to leave? Mm-hmm. What's wrong with you? It's such a mind fuck with these long open mics.
You literally have to, and that's what it really takes a lot of mental strength to do that, because for one, you're going to start second guessing all your jokes when you're sitting there for that long, yes. and that is literally not the point. And, you have to do little tricks to, brainwash yourself to be like, yes, I'm going to do it. I'm going to be like that. And, stand-up is the path of honesty. The more real you are about who you are and about what's going on, the audience will always know that and respect that. That is the true thing of stand-up comedy. So if you aren't, like if you're lying to yourself, if you're not like, I want to, like, oh, like you don't want to get too big of an ego. You always want to make sure you keep yourself in check, because you're like, oh, I'm going to go up there and crush. And you're like, yeah, right, dude, I don't want to speak like that to somebody, then go up there and bomb in front of the booker, when everybody else is bomb, when everybody else has said they're going to crush. It happens so much. One of another things I always like to say about that, what comics, we're talking about, such an isolated endeavor, and there's like really no other like business or form of, performing where some nights you're the greatest thing in the world. They'll carry you off stage. And then some nights you'll show up and they're like, what is this? And they just won't get it. So comics have to go, you'll be on a roll like, oh, I'm killing, I'm doing so good. And then you'll go to one spot and you'll just, for some reason, the audience just wasn't into it. Yes. Maybe you didn't check yourself. You might've been like, that happened to me the other night. My biggest thing is I worry about the first thing that comes out of my mouth, usually other than like, thank you, give it up for blah, blah, blah. But like my first joke, my first, like, starting the material, I worry so much. So the last like 2 shows, they've been good. So I'll be like, yes. All right. I got some that are starting off. And then of course I go to one show, silence on all first 3. And I'm like, all right, well, they don't like the boo-haws now. So I got to freaking go and do, jokes without them. And of course, I have the experience of, I know how to do that, and, got them on my side and then got back to doing the boo-haws. So you have to go through so many things.
You go through so much in real time. You're essentially thinking out loud, and you hit on something that I totally related to. I did the same thing. I did a couple shows and it went pretty good, and you're feeling good about yourself. And then you do that third one, you do the exact same words, exact same everything, and it's horrible. And then you're like, what was going on with those first 2 shows? I thought I had something here. And it just feels like whatever you built up got totally torn down, and you got to start all over again, and you second guess the entire thing. And that's comedy also with guys like you and me. You go up to these shows, nobody knows who you are. You are building an act from zero. You just have your words. You just have your words and your ideas. No one knows you from something else. You just have to build it there.
Yeah. Whenever that happens and I bomb, I always tell the audience, I'm like, see, folks, you understand why you haven't heard of me yet?
You see, sometimes some things. You're like, all right, if it goes well, then I say this. If it goes bad, then I say this.
Yeah, the bomb lines.
Yeah.
Those come about year 3, because you're like, all right, I can't do the first 10 minutes that I came out of the gates with, and so it's like, wait, what am I actually talking about? Wait, am I actually funny? And so when you're trying new stuff, they just don't work. But if you address that they don't work, obviously that gets a laugh, because the audience is like, okay, good, you're not taking yourself so serious, or you're actually kind of a funny guy. But when you're the comic and you're writing, you're like, dude, I'm getting more laughs on my, me talking about how hard I'm bombing than these actual jokes. And of course, that's always like, oh no. But there's just a period that you go through in your stand-up comedy that it's going to happen, and it's not a bad thing, because you're still getting laughs. Yes, your jokes suck, but you're still being able to get laughs from you being up there, dealing with whatever adversity that you're putting yourself into.
Dealing with the losses is, I would maybe 65% of the battle. I grew up playing sports, and in particular cycling, and cycling race is 100+ guys. So you think every single race there's one winner and 199 losers. Yep. So I knew loss pretty well, but every time a race happens or an open mic happens where you don't do as good as you find some justification. You're like, okay, well that was new, or you know what, nothing got laughs, but I gave it a full effort, or you know what, the host sucked. That sucked. Sometimes
The
you find
audience
some
sucked.
justification to keep going. And he's like, well, you know what, that was a dead room, but I did okay for a dead room. Same with cycling. It's like, you know what, I got top 25. There was 100 guys. So I get the building yourself up after the constant loss is a real effort in mental exercise as well. You had a tweet I want to read to you that hit
Oh my
home for
gosh,
me.
she did some research.
I do my research on you,
Well,
Mikey Mckernan.
I want to just say something about that. Was I remember one of the first advices I got when I first started was 90% you're going to bomb. Like it's all like comedy is 90% failure. Like you have to be ready that it's all not going to, like most of it's not going to work, but you have that 10% that does. And basically the more you work on that, the more it's going to grow. Because everybody hates bombing. I still hate bombing. I
Hate
still
it.
need to learn how to like sit in the silence. I had a little bit last night, so it felt good. So go ahead with the tweet.
Well, I hear it in my own voice. When I know it's not going well, I hear my voice change. I hear my voice get higher and quicker, and it turns into a sing song. And I'm like, I'm not in control of myself right now. And look what's happened to me. It's a surreal experience to be almost have an out of body experience.
Yeah, it's flop sweat. That's what it's the old school term has always been, flop sweat. And it's funny. I always like to talk. Like I washed my hair today, but it's like when my hair's clean, it covers like my receding hairline. But when I start sweating up there, man, I always call it the racing stripes. My hair just starts thinning.
Oh, it curls.
Just like you can just start seeing it because they start thinner and thinner and thinner. So I'm like, all right, you know, I had a terrible set because I start sweating up there.
Mikey's got those curls going.
Yeah, they're okay today. I knew I was going to be on.
They look good today.
Thank you. I knew I was going to be on the internet, so I was like, I better look.
Here's a tweet that I found interesting. You sent out a few days ago. Today marks 14 years of being an open mic comedian. Can someone put my name in the bucket for another 14? Okay, I have a lot of thoughts about this tweet, but I want to know where your mindset is when you wrote this. What did you mean by that?
Hilarious.
Take me through that.
This is fun because I never, we never get to be like, oh, behind the tweet. And so, well, I had it, you always get excited when your open mic, your first open mic birthday anniversary comes around, because it's like, hey, I've been at it for like this many years now, do. But when you start getting to like 12, 13 years, you're like, are you really going to, promote that? You know what I mean? And basically they say by 10 years, you should already have your voice, you should definitely have a podcast, developing your audience, and start thinking about, doing an hour. And, you should technically already have an hour. And if you are really very talented, you could be already selling that hour, like maybe album special or, headlining clubs and stuff like that. So I'm like, all right, year 14, I don't have an hour. I mean, I can do an hour, but I don't have one.
Right.
And so I'm still an open micer. Like I go to open mic comics, like people are always like, you're a legend in the scene. I'm like, I'm an open mic legend. And basically, so I'm like, all right, I have to tell everybody like, I've been doing comedy for 14 years. Jack from the Haha, Jack Senior, he's always like, if he ever is, standing around, here's a conversation of how many years you say you've done comedy. He'd be like, oh, I've been doing comedy for this many years. He's like, yeah, but how many of those were you funny? Mm-hmm. And it's always kind of, I like that because you're like, that's not a bad, thing, but I'm not saying like, yeah, I've been funny this many years, but this is how long I've been doing comedy. So I always be like, yo, I'm an open mic comedian. I've been doing comedy for 14 years. And basically, since I'm saying open mic comic, I wanted to be like, hey, can someone sign me up for, still doing open mic comedy? So that's where I was like, yo, I've been open mic for 14 years. Put my name in the bucket for another 4. Can someone, put my name in the bucket for another 14 years? Because I'm doing this forever. It's literally like, I call it a curse. Stand-up comedy is literally a curse. You can walk away from this. A lot of people do. You can walk away. You can stop doing comedy, but you stop writing jokes. Mm-hmm. And that's the biggest thing, is that you will let go and be like, oh, I'm happy on myself. But then you're like, oh, that's funny. That's funny. Oh, I'd love to say that on stage. And that's where it really comes back, where you can't really let it go. It's like rock and roll. They say you had the crossroads where you sign your soul with the devil for rock and roll. Like stand-up comedy is You're like, what are you talking about? That's exactly it. We have to do this for years for people to actually even hear about us, or also be really, really, you have to be really, really funny.
Not that far a trip from the rock and roll to the stand-up comedy.
No, not at all. Yeah, no, open mic comedy is literally like 27 lead singers signing up.
Yeah, yeah, you're absolutely
Um,
right. Like, let me talk now. Let me talk into this microphone. Everybody listen to me for a little bit. Well, what I guess I liked about the tweet is, I think you even said it earlier, is the honesty. Is like, this is what I am. This is how much I've done it. Hey, I'm in it for, just keep putting me in the bucket. So I'm coming up on 10 years. And I struggle with the same thing. I'm like, shouldn't I be doing more than this? What have I done to trip over my own feet? What could I be doing? Because somebody out there is doing more than me. So I don't want to play the victim card where like, oh, this is how it goes. If only I was this or that. Like, somebody out there is working hard. So the second I start complaining is another step towards quitting. So that's what I liked about it, is that, like, okay, sometimes you just get like, this is the rut I'm in, and I'm just going to keep pushing. Well, let me go way back though, Mikey. Where did
One
you
more thing.
Go ahead.
Sorry. You just got good points. I just remember when I first started too, like hearing about other guys who's like, oh, I've been doing this for 14 years. And you're like, oh, I never want to be that guy, but it's like, I am that guy. I have to man up to like who I am about this. You know what I mean? So, and dude, the 10 years, it's so different because it's really all about, we're doing this for a form of recognition. So you really have to evaluate what kind of recognition that you want. Who do you want recognition from and stuff like that? Because if it's more eyeballs, then you say like, okay, I need to get in front of more eyeballs, or if it's like, I want to get, I want the Comedy Store to recognize me. Then so it's like, okay, then you basically just have to put yourself dedication. But there's so many different things. Plus, there's so much evolution going on, especially with technology, where we should be doing like social media and stuff like that. But look at 10 years, you have a podcast. You know what I mean? Do you have a website?
Yes, I do.
You got a website. So those are like so many things that some people like, they don't realize it's so important. Like, you got to have a website. Because when bookers look you up, they're like, yo, PatrickRamirezComedy.com. Like, they're like, okay, good. I can go to his dates. I can see where there's booking. That's professionalism. Then it's like, all right, how is he trying to get a following? Oh, he's got a podcast. Great. Then he's actually putting effort towards that. But of course, it's all about planting the seeds. How much water you put on. So
yeah, it goes back to that entrepreneurship. It's like, just go make your own.
Yeah.
Go make your own fan base. Go make your own comedy. And we really have no excuse anymore. It's like, well, I would do that, but I can't make movies. Like, oh, you got a phone? Go make one right now.
Exactly.
You and I have seen it. I used to host an open mic in the Valley, and there was one guy who was just signing up for the open mic, and he was okay. He was fine. He wasn't great. He wasn't bad. And then one day I saw his name like at some club. I was like, oh, he's going to open for somebody. And he was headlining. I said, when did this happen? And I looked him up, and he made funny TikTok videos, and they were pretty funny. And that's what got him in the club. So I was like, okay, well, that guy looked at the situation and said, well, I'm going to make my own following, and then they'll come to me, because right now I need them more than they need me. How can I flip it? And I think that's the state we're in now. It's like, go make some shit on your own, and then we'll listen to you talk, because the pool is too deep. The pool is too saturated.
It's insane. It's really insane. Like, I mean, like, when you first came to this town, you're like, oh, what's your dream role? It's like, oh, I want to do this and all that. They're like, oh, well, you should already be doing all that on your own with a following. Like, the industry, they don't care until you have followings, because they're like, yeah, like, I don't think a lot of normal people understand, like, this was going back to another point you had where, we see influencers or YouTubers or TikTokers, they get headlining gigs because it's like, the industry's like, oh, you have a following, we want to sign you. So then it's like, okay, well, you're funny, we'll send you out auditions, but in the meantime, go do stand-up comedy. Even though they don't tell them about how hard the art form is and how many years it takes to actually be good at it, to actually try to get the time to headline and invite people, but they don't care. They can sell the tickets. People will come see them. And of course, when you go see the acts, they're not really good stand-up comedy. It's more Q&A, more like, hey, let's talk about my TikTok videos.
Yeah. Storytelling. I always think it's a tell when a comic says, oh, I'm more of a storyteller. That always rings a bell in my head. It's like, this person is not a right. So
hilarious.
It is a bit of a sign of the times, because like, I'm 40 years old and I see the influencer stuff, and I say like, oh, okay, that's Why do they always being up YouTubers and influencers? Then I think like, well, the industry is not my age and older. The industry is young too, and this is what they like. And it takes a second. It's again, I see it with sports when my dad was like, why are they always dunking? Why are they always dunking it? Why don't they huddle? Why are they doing it? Why are they taking the ball from the shotgun? And like, Dad, that's how they do it. But that's his generation. His generation didn't see that. So the industry or whatever is always evolving. And it can be really frustrating.
Oh, yeah.
It really, really can. So I think we're in a very similar boat in that regard. But tell me, where did you start comedy, Mike? Or where are you from?
I'm from Rancho Cucamonga, California.
Oh, you're from here. You're from the West Coast.
I'm a SoCal resident. So, yeah, the second I got out of high school, I came straight to LA and I wanted to be an actor. I tried doing stand-up when I was 18. I was in a contest at the Ontario Improv and I took third place. You ever heard of Charlene Yee?
No, I haven't.
She was, did you ever see, you saw The 40-Year-Old Virgin?
Yes.
She's like this, she was a token Asian girl on the couch. And then she ended up being in a movie with Michael Cera called Paper Hearts. That was like,
oh, I see. Okay.
Well, she was like, she started stand-up comedy. So she was in the contest. I took third. She took second. She actually ended up winning like Andy Kaufman Award through UCB. Like she,
wow.
Yeah, she kind of made a name for herself. So I didn't, I was like, no, I'm 18 years old. I don't want to do. But 22 years old, my first ever open mic was in Burbank, California, March 21st, 2008.
Wow.
Romancing the Bean, RIP. Technically, Romancing the Bean still exists, but the place I did it was. And of course, I started in Los Angeles, which is, they'll tell you, the worst place because it's already too much comedy going on. There's not enough crowds to really hone who you are. You should try to find places where, like I should have started in the Inland Empire to kind of hone that stuff. But, Los Angeles.
You start where you start. I would always say like, well, I wish I started younger. And then I kind of think like, well, I had nothing to say when I was younger. You start when you start.
Exactly. Like when I was 18, I was like, man, I'm still living at home. I like work at a freaking video store. And then my dad just tells me to take the trash out. Like I can't do stand-up comedy.
Right. Yeah. I was the same way. Like who would listen to me? I liked stand-up comedy. I wanted to do it, but I never had enough motivation to go sign up for something until I went and signed up for something.
Question.
So, yeah, go ahead.
Did you ever go see stand-up comedy live when you were a teenager?
Oh yeah, I sure did. Yeah, I saw, let's see, I was into watching stand-up comedy on HBO specials on TV. Oh, yeah. And that's when I was like, oh, this is pretty funny. I have no idea what it is. I thought cameras just showed up to these guys' show and that's what a special was. So my dad saw that me and my brother were watching these specials and he said, oh, let's go look up who's coming into town and I'll take you guys. We were about 16 years old and we went to go see, this was about mid-90s. We went to go see Carlos Mencia in my hometown. I'm from West Texas. So
hilarious.
This was a huge event, but we didn't know who he was. We know who Carlos Mencia was. I was like, let's just go watch it. And I had never heard so many consecutive curse words, English, Spanish, everything. And at some point I look over and my dad is laughing his head off. And I'm like, oh, this is cool. Like he's okay with the curse words. So we had a great time, so much that my dad is like, we're going to see him again when he comes into town. And this time we take my mom and my mom is horrified. my mom got mad at my dad for bringing us. So
hilarious.
That's a little
16
bit
years old. Come on.
Right. Yeah. And he was doing like all the Mexican jokes, which like we all got. It was the best thing ever. And one of his openers was from my hometown. And it was a little bit of like, people from this town can do shit.
Oh,
people from this town leave.
Name?
Freddie Soto.
Oh, damn.
And then he passed away.
All right.
But it was a little eye-opening that like someone from my hometown could do something creative. So that was cool. And then I just kind of followed it.
Radical story.
Yeah, it's a pretty interesting story. And I just followed it. And then I signed up, a million years later. But that's where I first saw it. And then one time I had a cousin. She was about 5 years older than us. She had a boyfriend. And he would tell me and my brother, like, you guys ever go to a comedy club? And we're like, no, what's that? He's like, I'm taking you guys to a comedy club. And we went to see a comedy hypnotist at a club. And
hilarious.
There was 8 people in the crowd, Mikey.
Oh my God.
This room was empty.
It sounds like the flappers in your area.
It was not that far off. And this comedy hypnotist did this amazing show for 8 of us. And it was an unreal form of entertainment. Like, you go to the movies, no one's in the theater. The movie plays the same way. You still enjoy it.
You even see comics who are hilarious do 8 people in a room. They're not going to probably,
Right.
put on the performance that you're speaking about.
Right. It was crazy. He had people hypnotized, and we walked out and like, that was amazing. So those were my early comedy sightings or roots. But again, I was, a teenager, late teens. I didn't start comedy till over a decade later.
Yeah.
It just sort of grew in me, and I just had it in my head. But it just and I think back to that, like, that was pretty crazy. My dad took us to go see Carlos Mencia.
Yeah, that was before he was Mina Mencia and blew up.
This was height of Mencia. This was Apex Mountain Mencia. Wow. Like, he came back like 3 weeks later to my hometown, to another sold out auditorium. My hometown could not get enough of.
Do you remember the club name of that comedy hypnotist was that?
The Comic Strip in El Paso, Texas. It's still there.
Oh, that's freaking awesome.
Yeah, that's where that was. And it was just like looking back on it, this was probably just a road comic, just going small town to small town. And whoever shows up and does his act. I never seen anything like it. He had people barking like dogs on the stage. He had people. I remember specifically, he hypnotized one girl to think she was Madonna, and he had her dancing on the stage. It was unlike anything else, and there was no way it could have been faked. I was like, "There's no way this is fake. He's really hypnotizing these people." I still have no idea.
How do you react to comedy hypnotized shows now?
I don't know. I guess I still get a kick out of them. Hilarious. In the sense that they're very entertaining. I did have, when I was in college, they had one of those comedy shows like in an auditorium, and it was a hypnotist, and he does the show.
Where'd you go to college?
I went to college in Santa Fe, New Mexico.
Oh yes.
And it
wasn't the arts one, right?
Yep, it sure was. It closed.
Wait, it's the same one that Annie Letterman and
Annie Letterman went there. Rick Ingram, who works at the Comedy Store, went there for a year.
Hilarious.
And Ryan Stout, if you know who that is.
Yeah. Went
there for a year as well. Some odd people went there. Art school, very small. And it was like a high school after high school. So it was very strange, but they had a comedy hypnotist, and he does the show. It was fine. We like it. And I lean over to my buddy afterwards. I'm like, "Hey, pretty weird show, right?" And he goes, "Yeah, when's it going to start?" He got hypnotized in the audience.
Oh my gosh.
He was out for the whole show. And that's when I was like, this has to be real. This has to be real up there, what he's doing.
Hilarious.
Yeah, he was like, "Yeah, when's it going to start?" He was out. He was out for the show. It was very unusual.
Dude, I want to go to Santa Fe, New Mexico so bad, mostly for like...
Have you ever been?
I've never been. I just want to go for like Old West frontier history. Like Kit Carson is like one of my favorite figures that I'm into. And he is like he's not from, but he lived in Teos. It's like north of Santa Fe, and there's a museum. Got to get the vlog up there, man.
It is... I grew up out west too. I was Texas, New Mexico, Utah, and here. And out west, we have so much space. Like, being from Southern California, and New Mexico is just so much space. And it's such a collection of people where like, just stop moving. Like, I guess I just live here now. This is where I live. So it's got Native American, Caucasian. It's an arts community. And then it has this weird selection that is people of Spanish descent too. Wow. So it's very unusual, and it's expensive. It's very poverty-stricken, Native American as well. I went back for my college reunion years ago, and I was like, I lived here for 4 years.
Dang.
And then some kids like graduated and stayed in town. I was like, you stayed in this town? Why? What do you do here? Do people work here? It was an unusual college experience.
I always try to say like California is the end of the road of America. If you like go to Venice Beach, you can kind of see like there's no more land to discover, but it sounds like that's where New Mexico is,
New Mexico would be, if you were going out west, but your car broke down in New Mexico, you're like, well, let's just make a go of it here. I always
Hilarious.
joke that California is a place where people come to chase their dreams, but very close to that, it's a place where people come to run from their past too.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
It has a lot of that. It has a lot of like goals that have just evolve over time. You change your goals, you start work somewhere or you have a family or something.
Change your identity, you change your name. Oh, this
Change
is
your
my new
identity.
stage name now. I'm going by Michael Mckernan.
I'm going by Pat. There's not enough Pat comedians out there.
Miss
So you
Pat.
start out here at the young age of 22. What was the goal? You always wanted to do stand up or were you into acting as well? Who were you emulating? Who did you like as a stand up?
I grew up playing ice hockey my whole life. So like when I was a little kid, I really thought I was going to be an ice hockey player, like the NHL. And then I quit at 16 years old. And then I wanted to be an actor. So I was literally an actor trying to do stand-up comedy. But ever since I was 9 years old, I've had a goal in life, and that is to make Jim Carrey laugh.
Wow.
So basically I've always emulated Jim Carrey. He's my number one, like Mount Rushmore. It's Jim
Oh,
Carrey.
you know what? I see that in you now. I never would have
Yeah.
thought that, but I see that
Yeah.
in you.
Yeah. So it's totally Jim Carrey. And I got my dad. It's funny because my dad, he did sports, but he did high school theater. So when I quit hockey, he's like, you need to do theater.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. I
Yeah.
never heard a dad who was down with sports and theater.
Yeah, he was really into it. What's even funnier, sidetrack, my dad actually did open mic comedy way back in the day. Still
Wow.
remember as a little kid, there was a videotape of my dad wearing a Los Angeles Kings t-shirt, having a mullet, and talking into a microphone with a black curtain or with blue curtains.
Whoa.
I just remember the video. And so what it was my dad signed up for a comedy contest and crushed. And then he went to go do it again the second night or like for the second time and he bombed and he never did it again. So when I first started doing comedy, he was so involved, and I was like, all right. And he was like, because I would go to the Haha, it was like the first club you go to, and then so he's like, yo, I want to try to do a show, and I'm like, all right, well, what's your set? And he would just literally do internet jokes because he was a bartender. He was a bartender for so many years, and I tried to tell him, like, you can't tell jokes you've heard. You have to tell your own jokes. You have to tell your own experiences and stuff like that. So I got into high school theater and I got into that. And then when I got out of high school, there was a comedy contest and I was like, oh, I want to. And people always told me to do it. But then I tried it a couple of times and, like I did the contest and it went well. And I remember guys like, hey, come do comedy. Like, here's a comedy show. Here's my card. Come check this out. But I was 18 and it's bars. So I'm like, no, man, I'm not there. And then my friends would play music. And so I would like kind of MC sometimes. Like when I first started doing my set, I would quote a whole scene from Dumb and Dumber. And then I would do Will Ferrell's impersonation of Harry Carey. So I was doing impersonation. And what's very ironic about that is I'm not kidding you. Rick Ingham says that he did the same exact thing. When he first started doing, he would do Will Ferrell's Harry Carey. Yeah, I was like, that's insane because I did the same exact thing. I was like, not only was I plagiarizing, I'm literally doing someone else is doing this act already. And then, so I was like, kind of like, around, and then 2006, I created my sticker, Mikey Mckernan is not funny. I was in a sketch comedy improv troupe. And then that Christmas, my parents made me t-shirts. So I had all this merchandise and I wasn't like a comedian. So I was like, oh my God, this is crazy. And of course, acting was stupid. Like, you're waiting for your phone to ring for auditions, of course that was kind of the time where I was like, you should start doing your own stuff. But I was like, no, that's all too intimidating to me. And then I was like, fine. No, then I met this guy on YouTube or on Craigslist. He was living in Burbank. He was obsessed with Buster Keaton and the black and white shorts. So he was like, I want to do black and white short YouTube videos. And I was so into it. But the thing was, I was still really intimidated about creativity. And like, I should have been like, no, let's do it. Like, whatever you want to do. Like, we tried to do a Shakespeare hockey one and it was just kind of dumb. They're kitschy.
Shakespeare on ice?
But it wasn't even on ice. Like, we were at like a tennis court and it just didn't go so well. And, but he was like, let's go try, because he wanted to do sketches. And I was like, I want to do sketches. I really love doing live sketch comedy shows. I'm not savvy with putting sketches on the internet, but I want to find somebody, which I found this dude online. So he showed me Romancing the Bean. And he's like, there's an open mic. Let's go try our sketches out. And then maybe afterwards we can try our own little individual stand-up. And I was like, yes, I have stuff that I've been working. Like I've kind of like, I'm ready for that. I need to do that. And of course we did the sketches. They didn't go so well. He did his set. He hated it, but I went up there and I did mine and I really enjoyed it. And then so he was bummed out. Like he was like, oh
Ah.
man, I don't want to, this isn't good. And I was like, yes, this is it. I'm doing this forever. I'm going to become the next Jim Carrey, blah, blah, blah. But before that, it was Jim Carrey, but the one that, because it's always been Jim Carrey, even since I was a kid in the funny business, acting and stand up. But the one guy who got me to do stand up comedy was Bill Hicks.
Really?
Yeah, I got really
You
into
knew of Bill Hicks from such a young age, huh?
Well, I knew about Bill Hicks before I did stand up when I was a teenager because of conspiracy theories. Like
Ah.
he was quoted in the Zeitgeist documentary. Do you remember that?
Yeah. Oh, I do remember
Yes.
that
Yeah.
documentary floored me
So I was
when I
like,
first
dude,
saw
who's
it for
this?
like a whole day.
Yeah. So I was like, who's this dude saying these things? And
Yeah.
people are laughing at him. So I was like, me and my friend, we got into Bill Hicks, like more like conspiracy theorists, like that way, like, that type of form. But it was like, man, he goes up there and tells the truth. And it was always so funny. So I was like, all right. But also too, Jim Carrey, Bill Hicks, and I was really into, like, my first guy I saw when I was a teenager in high school, saw him 3 times at the Ontario Improv, is Dane Cook. I was
Mm-hmm.
obsessed with, me and my friends in high school were obsessed with Dane Cook. So I was like, Dane Cook. Then I listened to Mitch Hedberg, and then I read Born Standing Up by Steve Martin. Have you read that?
Yeah. Yeah. I
Oh,
know the
dude.
book.
And so that's what it was. It was basically Bill Hicks and Born Standing Up, because Steve Martin talked about starting with so many bad magic tricks. So I was like, man, I got these weird things I want to do on stage. It wasn't the Boo-Haws yet, but it was like, I wanted to be weird. I want to be different. So
Mm-hmm.
once I read that book and I got the confidence, and I was like, all right, we're going.
Yeah.
March 22nd, 2008, 21st. 2008.
Well, what kind of, because I see in your stand up, I see your personality. And the fact that you said, like, I want to be weird, I want to be silly. I definitely see that in your, like, it doesn't feel like an act. It feels like you put together an act and stuff like that. But it doesn't feel like like it's a long stretch for you. Were you always into something a little off center? What were you like as a kid in that
Yeah,
regard?
I'm the youngest of 7. So,
Ah, okay.
and then I played sports. So I've always been around people, and I've always been entertaining. Like I would always entertain like the hockey parents. I would go to
Oh,
my friends,
really?
like, yeah, I remember going to my friends like parents parties, and they would make me they would make me quote, um, the karaoke scene from The Cable Guy when Jim Carrey,
Yeah.
like they would, because I could do it so well, and they always crack up about that. So it was like, I always was like a funny guy, but I was like, and this is where they always said you can say funny things or say things funny. And so that's where I was like, okay, I know I'm a movie quoting type of person. Plus, also with, you can relate to this being in sports, performing. Like I'm coming from a performing background, so I'm going to use that as like, you know, that's like my rocket ship. Like I'm going to stick to that. Of course, now it's like I have to be a writer. Like writing is the biggest thing about this. But because every comic, you can say they come from a background of writing or from a background of performing, and of course, it's being the both. So I was, always a weird kid. And then when I was going to go on stage, I wanted to talk about weird stuff. I was really into, because I never was creative growing up that much. So I was really into writing poetry at the time. And I was really into spirituality. So
Wow. Such range, Mikey.
yeah. So I was trying to do jokes like, oh, I'm not, like I want to perform at like cool spots. Like, like I'm not, even though I still kind of claim that I'm a coffee shop comedian, like I will always like destroy coffee shops because those are like, those are like my people type of thing. But then again, there's no coffee shop comedy tours, So
Yeah, that's true. You get the
even though
coffee bean, Starbucks.
but I wanted to do one so bad. Like, wouldn't it be great? Like if I found like an independent coffee company, like wrap a car and then like go to like coffee shops, like, hey, I'm here to pitch the coffee as well, but we're also going to do a clean comedy show. So, coffee shops, you got to be clean. So
Yeah, good point. Yeah, you got to deal with the espresso machine in the background, blenders,
kids,
the clerks yelling out the orders.
recovering addicts.
A lot of recovery. There's a dude in my neighborhood. I'm pretty sure he's a recovering addict. I see him at the coffee shop every morning. He's got the cup of coffee, 2 hands around the cup, and it just looks like he's hanging on.
Yeah,
I'm
no
like
lid.
this.
Got his lid off the side. He's just breathing in the steam.
He's wearing a big jacket, but the sleeves are pushed up, and I'm like, this dude has miles on his tires.
Absolutely. Yeah, you always find those. It's funny too, because I love going to like it's, if I ever had to like make a dating profile, like you had to put my hobbies. Like I like reading and I like going to coffee shops. And I'm like, okay, reading is not a social hobby. And then coffee shops, those are just people who are like, no, don't talk to me, man. I like being by myself and working on what I'm doing here. So I'm like, these are not good traits to, try to invite anybody else into this.
So
And those are the
weird.
type of individuals at coffee shops. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's true. It's almost an extroverted activity for those who are introverted.
Yeah, I go to like a kind of a bougie coffee shop in the valley, but it's independent. There's those are always going to have a little bit of bougie, and it's in a rich area. But it's like the first coffee shop I found when I came to LA. So, but so many people go there all the time on the regular, like every day is like retired old guys and stuff. So
Ah,
like there are some friends, but it's so funny to see some who are like they don't like to interact, because then it's like, oh, if I say hi to you now, then it's like I gotta say hi to you every single
yeah.
day. And then it's like, yeah, I'm like, like there's a comic who actually, I don't want, he's probably not gonna listen to this, but he comes to the coffee shop and I'm always like, oh, what's up, dude? And I'm always like, yeah, I'll step away from my work and I'll listen to you. Always talks about himself though. And it's like all the gripes about how like, and he's always like, I'm not doing comedy. I'm not doing enough comedy. And I'm like, hey man, I try to give you advice, but then like, he'll ask me something and I say one thing and it's got to relate back to him and stuff like that. And it's like, I understand. But then again, it's like, I'm very friendly with everybody, but it's the coffee shop, community is hilarious.
So you're a kid who likes to perform. You're good with the parents, and yet somehow you're still very introverted. You like your time by yourself.
Oh yeah. Well, when I moved out of the family house, I lived in like a room attached to the garage, and because I do have hermit tendencies in my family. So
Mm-hmm.
I've gotten like, I got really into myself, and not like, oh, I'm so good, but like, no, like, yo, figure this out. If you're going to be so loud and outgoing, like you got to make sure the insides are, stuck together. That's where like, when I got out of high school, I got really into reading,
Mm-hmm.
and I got
What
really
would
into
you
Buddhism,
read?
like mostly like the classic novels, like
Ah,
On the Road, like Catcher in the Rye, like mostly all those, because that was the age, it was trying to
yeah.
like, figure out identity, figure out your reason, what you want to do on this planet, And I mean, I kind of had an idea like I wanted to do comedy, but I was trying to be an actor in the early teenage years. So, or the teenage years. So they're always like, be you. You got to be who you are. Like, everybody can be an actor, but like, how interesting are you? So I was like, ooh, I'm gonna write poetry and get into reading, and like, ooh, my family was never religious, so I could choose anyone, and Buddhism and stuff like that.
Where do you think all this introspection comes from in you? Were you always like that? Did you have influences, or what did your parents do?
Yeah, well, it's see, because I was raised by teenagers. So
Hmm.
whenever I was like, hey, I want to be like this, they like always put me in my place. And my brother I remember he called me out. This was, I forgot how long ago this was, but it was like adult ages. But he's like, you always try to fit in, like with every group you always get into, it's like, you always like want to like, oh, look at me, I'm with this group now. And I try to tell him like, that's because I grew up in a group, hockey team, big family. So I like always being around people. And so I'm a huge people person. And my parents, like when we were young, they were really, really poor. And like, but when we were, because like my mom got married, had 3 kids, and then that guy left, and then my dad had 3 more. But my dad kind of helped raise the first 3.
Hmm.
And I didn't know they were my halves until I got older, to learn all that. They just always been around.
Oh,
So
interesting. Yeah.
yeah, so when my parents were poor, they kind of like had the first 3 kind of raised the younger 3. And so they kind of kept us like in the dark about how bad our life was. Like we're just like, oh look, the car farted, and it's like, tiny car with 6 kids in his burnt in oil, you know what I mean? And it's like, I remember my parents like hit bankrupt. And then my mom was a teacher, and then my dad owned his own stucco company, like construction wise. So my mom's retired now, and then my dad, he loves working in business. So my like hardcore work ethic definitely comes from my dad. But my dad was a lifetime bartender, and I said, so he's got one of the greatest sense of humors ever. And then my mom, because both sets of kids, come from her, she's kind of like the Buddha, so we all kind of worship her, and she's always laughed at everything. And so, like, even though like we grew up with like crappy stuff, but we always just kind of been funny people. Like my family's really shy when you get to know them. Like at first, everybody's really kind of reserved, but then after like you get to know them, everybody's like really outgoing and stuff. Like every single one of my family members still has like their first ever best friend. Like, well, I
Wow.
mean, a couple of them have passed, but RIP. But but it's like, my family is everything. Like my whole thing is like, I come from this, like, who am I? It's because I was raised by this motley crew.
What's your heritage?
Oh, I'm Irish and Italian. So my
Ah,
dad's Irish, and then my mom's side was Italian. There's a little like, and then my mom's side goes a little bit deeper on England. So
I
yeah,
see.
over there, nothing strange. Mikey Mckernan, like that's the most
Hmm.
Italian Irish name ever.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. The you know what's kind of weird? I think about this with my folks is the work ethic thing you mentioned with your dad. I don't know if you can teach a work ethic. I think you just have to see it done. Like my dad
Yeah.
never said, I mean, he always said, wake up early, work hard, get good grades. But I just remember my dad always working. My dad
Yeah.
worked holidays,
Mhm.
and he just always working, but he never was like, I gotta go to work. He liked working. And my grandpa, the same, my grandpa's 94 years old, and he will still go to work for half a day. They just have to work, and it's just like you
Yeah.
just see it as a little kid, and you're like, oh, that's what you do. Oh, you got to work a little bit on the weekend, not too bad. And I think it definitely translates into something that can be potentially crappy, like showing up to open mics. It's like, yeah, but that's what I want to do, and it's okay if it's crappy as long as I keep at it. That's better than not keeping at it than just staying home. What am I going to stay
Exactly.
home? Am I going to get better by staying home? So I think that work ethic, maybe it's different for males to females, but I think as a male, you see your dad doing something day in, day out. You just start to adopt that practice in a positive way. I think that's my Pat Ramirez psychology corner.
Well, it's generational. You know what I mean? And we think about like, like our fathers and grandfathers, like they work.
Hmm.
Like you work, not be creative. Like we have to work. And so that's like you said, it's in your loins,
I think
to be
so.
like,
Yeah.
and it's different with, with women because you can say their generations were like mother,
Hmm.
like home and stuff like that. So, but now it's like, it's going to be like, man, it's so much evolution has been going on.
Hmm. Yeah, definitely. It's amazing what you gleam onto as a kid that you never knew. It was never spoken to you. It was never said to you. You're just like, oh yeah, that's what my dad does. That's what my mom does. Hey,
Yeah.
my crazy uncle, that's what he does. And then years later, you process it, and you're like, that was kind of weird. That was kind of wacky, right? What was his deal? Or you know what? That was a good lesson. I never really put it together as a kid. So yeah, I think you said it's just in your loins. It becomes hardwired into your DNA at some point. And then again with the sports, is like my dad, I always sucked at school sports, but my dad would be like, you just got to put in your time. Next year, you'll be a little bigger, you'll be a little faster, you'll probably play a little bit more, but there's no quitting the team. It's like, if you want to quit, you go to the end of the season, then you just don't try out next year, but there is no quitting. So I see that now and I'm like, yeah, absolutely. You can't quit something in the middle
Oh yeah,
of
dude,
it.
that was always a big red alert, even among all the coaches. And like, because my dad was always like, "You don't get hurt playing, or don't get hurt because you got to play hockey on the weekends." He's like, "That's my relax time. I love relaxing on the weekend and watching you play hockey." But I remember like one time, like I tried to quit, like I walked off the ice, and like coaches, like even like a coach that I've known for years, they like all will come and be like, "Hey man, like like don't give up." He's like,
Mhm.
"You're better than this. Don't quit. You just don't quit.
Yeah.
Don't leave. You can't abandon." Because that's like the whole thing is like, you got to stick through it because if you become a quitter, especially at a young age, this can become a very bad habit.
Oh my God. It
And
would be
you
a
start,
horrible habit.
you
Yeah.
just, and really what it comes down to is not believing in yourself. My brother went through, we both started hockey at the same time. He didn't go through with it. I did. And of course, like, he's like, oh, I wish I could have played hockey, blah, blah, blah. But it's really important as a child. But then I thought your dad did pretty good because it's like, no, don't worry, man. It's like, there's no like, you have to be a certain thing, but it's just like, yo, you agreed to be on the team. You got to just,
Right.
follow through with
Yeah,
that
it's a good
obligation.
lesson to learn as a kid. It's essentially the please and thank you for a little kid. It's like you agreed to be on the team. You stick it
Yeah.
out through
Yeah.
through
That's,
the whole
I
season.
mean, like, I can't, like, I look forward to raising kids because I'm going to be like, I want them to make choices, but then it's like, you have to understand the consequences of your choices,
Hmm.
like, yo, like, hey, I will, like, especially when they're teenagers. Oh, I want to smoke. I'm like, well, can you afford it? Do you have a job? All right. Well, then you're wasting someone else's money. So it's
Hmm.
like, make a choice here. You want to do those fun things? Go get a job and you can pay for all that.
Yeah. It's so interesting. So my friends have kids now. My brother has a kid now, and you sort of see it now. I have a younger brother who's way younger than me. So I remember pseudo raising the kid or just like the little intricacies of a little
Yeah.
kid. Just stuff where like, all right, just let him do his thing, or like, all right, don't let him do that. Anytime a glass is anywhere near the edge of a table, you push it back to the center of the table.
Yeah.
I
You've
just
already
remember
raised kids.
yeah, I just remember all those little things and be like, oh, okay, this is what a parent does. Is just constantly looking out for their safety. And then every once in a while, they have to make a decision. They're gonna get in trouble. They're gonna fuck up. They're gonna lie to you at some point. And then you just subtly correct them. They're not bad people. They're not terrible Omen Damien kids. So I kind of get that now. So if I were to have a kid, I was like, all right, I got a little prep that it won't be quite so
Yeah.
devastatingly overwhelming.
But yeah, you see, you like all my older siblings, they did the same exact thing. Like my mom didn't get grandkids till about like 7 years ago because like all the other siblings were like, we freaking raised kids already. We don't want any kids now.
It's true. It's true. You have a huge family. Well, I want to ask about two things. Number one, you just performed at Coachella. Am I right?
No.
What was that post I saw of yours?
So basically, it's Coachella Valley Brewing Company.
Oh, gotcha.
It was a brewery company, and there's a kid out there who's doing a lot of comedy, and he does there. So basically, he got the brewery to put on a comedy festival. Well, it was just basically all day putting on shows in 3 different spots around the brewery. So
Oh, I gotcha.
it
How did
was
that
it
go?
has nothing to do with the Coachella Valley Music
The music festival. This was the Coachella Brewing
Brewing Company
Festival.
Festival.
Well, you
Yeah,
got
so
2 out of 3 names in there.
yeah. Well, and that's what was really funny about it. A lot of people, they're like, "Holy shit, is that like legit?" And it's like, no, 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 no. Read the fine print. It's Valley Brewing Comedy Festival. But
Well, you
it was
got me. I
actually,
was like, look at this. Mikey's at Coachella.
yeah. Well, I mean, I don't know. Coachella should be next April, I think it is.
Yeah, that's
But
true. Coachella's until the summer or
I
late
just
summer.
I always remember
Somewhere.
like around like 420. So yeah, no, it was not the Coachella Music Valley Festival. It was literally a lot of comics from in LA, and then in the comics out there just doing shows in the tap room, show in the beer garden, show in the, in the brewery. It's actually fun. He's a cool
Gotcha.
dude. You should hit him up
That's
if you want.
cool.
I'm going to drive 2 hours for a spot.
I've driven more before.
Yeah, there's Palm Desert's got some good roofs. Shout out to Dakota Miracle. I should give him a shout out for that. That was a lot of fun.
How about, okay, your YouTube series? When did you start this? You started about, I don't know, a year ago?
October.
October, and you're chronicling yourself going to shows and open mics, and your videos are pretty well done. They look good on the
Thank
screen.
you.
They're not just like an iPhone walking around. Where did this idea come from?
So it's the stand-up adventure vlogs. So basically, I mean, even before I was doing stand-up, it was, YouTube was slowly getting going, and it was like, yo, just talk to your selfie. But that's so narcissistic. So I avoided it for so long. But over time, I've fallen in love with vloggers, especially Disneyland vloggers. There's this one guy, yeah, because you think about it, it's like, man, I love Disneyland so much that I like, oh look, like I would watch, construction updates. Like there's people who literally go to the park every day and be like, look, they moved the trash can, and of course I'm like, oh, that's new Disneyland. It's YouTube is a form of brainwash. We all know this. And so there's one guy, his name is Justin Scott. I got really into him, but he would do outside adventures. Like he'd do Route 66. He'd do like Old West stuff. So I started, like, oh, I want to go to these places. So when I do comedy, I want to go see those places. So after a while, I'm like, we have to do more as comedians. And Andrew Schultz literally showed you that he's like, you don't need any of these big wigs to create your own following. And he put all his stuff out on YouTube. And he got a big following. Yes, he had teams and he had the best equipment, and of course it was great. So it was like, wow, he's right. We should be doing this ourselves. So I was like, I'm going to vlog because most of the vloggers I follow, I mean, Justin, he was like a punk rocker musician for years. So he has the performing background, but a lot of them don't have the comedy background. So I'm like, okay, I now have the confidence to finally do this because I have the background of comedy. I just don't have the vlogging voice or the experience. But the only way to do that is to start. And of course, the editing, like I was so intimidated by it all, but unemployment stopped. And I was like, I have to get some form of income. I got to try to get monetized on YouTube. So I bought a camera, about like a $600 point and shoots Sony ZV-1. It works perfect because I was like, I want to get the best one, you know, like those really good DSLR.
Yeah.
It looks so good because everybody's so worried about quality. But when it comes to like doing this for my first time, I was like, no, I should just, one guy was like, you know, I was like, talk to everybody, and I was so set on buying a camera. And this one guy's like, no, get a point and shoot. And it's like, you can see the quality. It actually doesn't suck. And it's like, for what I'm doing, it works perfectly. So in October, I grabbed it, and now it's like, all right, every, you know, place I go to, try to do a little like adventure and then show the stand-up comedy. And because, you know, I mean, even when you've been coming up through the open mic scene, how many times have you heard the conversation open mic documentary? Like how many times have people are like, yo, we got to show this to people. Like
Yeah.
And if you think about it, there's never been a big major, like there's been a couple of TV shows, but there's never been like the huge documentary. There's been a couple things, but because open mic comedy life, like when it comes to the general audience, they truly don't care. They really don't.
Right.
Like it's like there's nothing compelling to them for them. It's really the comedy scene and the comedy fan. So it's like if they want to see, you know, you're up and coming. So like so I like to say my channel is definitely geared towards like, this is what comedians can go through nightly, you know, like, oh, you can go through crushes, or you can go through bombs, or, you know, traveling and this and that. So there's basically, I realize there's plenty of content to do, and I just have to just get into doing it. And now that I've started doing it since October, like I really like it because I know this is stand-up is my life's work, and the YouTube channel is really, it's a good companion to go along with it. And yes, you have to like pretend that you're like way cooler than you are, and you're out in public, like, oh, look at me, I care so much about myself. And I still get intimidated about like I don't like going to mics sometimes because there's so many comics, and they want like, like comics I don't want to be on the vlog, will be like, let me be on your vlog. And I'm like,
right.
Of course I'm the nicest guy ever. And I'm like, okay, Tom Whalen, go ahead and talk about viral.
Tom Whalen.
Please, Tom. It's not so much bad viral, dude. You went McDonald's drive-through viral, dude. Like, you're selling merch off of that, you know. Anyways, but it's like, you know what I mean. So it's like it's so much fun, and I'm really enjoying it, and it's helping. And plus, like I said, you know, we got to put out all outlets. We got to have podcasts. You got to have a YouTube channel. You got to be even put out an album so you can put it on the waves of like Sirius to get that income. And then you got to, you know, do your TikTok because everybody's like, do TikTok, you know, make shorts, like your stand-up clips and stuff like that, Instagram reels. So it's just one of those lines. Cause when I stopped getting unemployment, I was like, I have to just do all those outlets. Cause once I have all those outlets, then I'm like, okay, they're all out, you know, yeah, there's going to take a while probably to, you know, generate some income, but just have them out. And it's so fun because now I'm like super insanely busy with actual work to do that I love it.
Well, I watched the episodes. They're all such a good window into the insight. Not only like the insight, like you said it, of the comedy and stuff like that, but the insight of you. Like it's you driving this whole thing. You are the product. So when people are like, "Oh, what's Mikey all about?" This you can see, and you're putting it out. You're producing it. It's your thoughts. It's your words. And it's like as comedy, like it was podcast 10 years ago, where like, you want to go find out about that guy you just thought was funny. No, you can go listen to him. You can hear more thoughts about it. And you've done the same with the visual. I'm like, here's what I'm most passionate about. And check it out. Here's the behind the scenes stuff about it too. Here's my thoughts. We're all creating our own media network, and just how we dress it is differently. I mean, I did it with this YouTube show, and I'm 50 something episodes in of interviews and stuff like that. It's like, I like talking to people, and I want to hear what they have to say. And man, it'd be cool if I could do that. Oh, wait a second. Why can't I? Yeah. Why don't I just go try it? And maybe I'll suck at first, but at least I'll start doing it. And yours are so cool like that.
Thanks, man. I really do appreciate that, dude. That was really nice of you to say. And recognition, you know what I mean? That's what it's all about. And I want to clip that. Like I want to clip what you just said about the vlog. It was so well put.
I'll cut it together.
Yeah, and that's awesome. And I do appreciate that. And the comedy fan today, you know, like when you think about the comedy fan back in the day before, you know, the internet, you know, people love being a comedy fan because they're like, yeah, this is like almost feels like my buddy, or he reminds me of like, you know, so-and-so. And it's like, I can hang out with them and talk. But today it's like the comedy fan is so close to the community because not only they like, oh yeah, the comedy, they're joking, we get to laugh about that, but they now get to hang out in the conversations because
Yeah.
of podcasting. They get to like sit there, and it's so funny because the fans know everything about the comedians nowadays. So it's like when you have a podcast that gets popular, you're going to show up and everyone's like, oh man, I know all this about you. And of course you don't know. You're like, whoa, I don't know anything about you. But we're so lucky as comedians that our fan base, they like, this is really one of the richest art forms because of like, you get to be funny and stuff like that. And then it's like, oh, I love comedy because not only it's like I can go see them live, there's a good chance they're hanging out afterwards. I can actually talk to them, meet them, and then it's like, oh, what's going on with their lives? I can sit and listen to their podcasts that they have weekly. So it's like, I'm still hanging out with them and, knowing what's going on in their life. So like the comedy fan is, they're well fed. They're happy. And that's great.
I always thought stand-up comedy is one of the most intimate forms of performance.
Oh, yeah.
And then not only do you have the stand-up, but you have the podcast, you have the YouTube video. Then the fan can go deeper beyond the performance, beyond the act. You're like, well, what's he think about this? The sports, the Super Bowl that happened yesterday. Oh, check it out. This happened with them. The intimacy just grows and grows and grows. And one of the things, like I was into talk radio as a kid, and I never knew this till later, is like one of the best things about talk radio is you're listening to this a lot of times by yourself, like in your car.
Yeah.
And you're just sort of listening to it. You're leaning on the conversation. Sometimes I would find myself doing this. If the radio host was interviewing somebody, they would ask them the question. I would answer the question as the interviewee.
Hilarious.
And I'd be like, I would answer it like this. I'm like, why would I? But it's so funny. We listen to it by ourselves and we have this sort of one-on-one experience, even though it's not intended. It's going out to millions of people. But
Dude, that's
that
so rad.
intimacy is there.
Yeah, it's so rad that you love talk radio because now it's like, look, now you're doing talk radio yourself, man. Like now you
Right,
got
I
your
ended
own
up doing
podcast.
talk radio. Same thing back to my grandpa. My grandpa would listen to talk radio and he would listen to Rush Limbaugh. I had no idea what Rush Limbaugh was, but I was like, he just talks and people ask him questions and he has these little sayings that only his fans know. When a caller would call in and they liked the show, they would say, hey, Rush, big fan, mega dittos. And I was like, what's mega dittos? And it's like, that's what his fans...
catchphrase, man.
That's his catchphrase. And then he would listen to Paul Harvey. And Paul Harvey was the news guy that would say like, and now you know the rest of the story. And then there'd be this huge pause. Good day? And I'm like, what the hell is that? That's what Paul Harvey does. Like, that's his thing. Paul Harvey does that. So it was interesting that you just listen to people talk.
Yeah.
And it was interesting. There was no music. There was no games. They just talk about shit.
Yeah, and it's so cool too because nowadays, like, so many people are doing like these little mundane jobs, or they got like so much time they just have a lot of time to themselves, but they're allowed to like put an earbud in, and so now it's like, dude, they listen to podcasts, and that's where it's like I was never, when the first started, I was like, yeah, right, no one's gonna listen to any of your guys' stuff, like that was like the whole thing, and I was like, I'm not listening to. There's no podcast I want to listen to, but then I fell in love with The Bonfire on Sirius XM with Big J Ogerson and Dan Soder. And so now I'm like, dude, I listen to that like 4 days a week. I can't miss those guys. And I can't, like, if I got a road gig on the weekend, I save like the whole week of,
Yes.
So then when I hit the road, I'm like, dude, I got plenty of stuff to listen
Yep,
to.
I do that too for like airplanes and stuff like that. I was like, let me save up a few things that I can listen to uninterrupted on the plane. Well, you led me into it perfectly because you have an announcement for this weekend.
Yes.
What's going on, Mikey Mckernan?
I will be hosting for Big J Ogerson at the Ontario Improv, March 31st through April 2nd. Get tickets immediately. This is my hometown. This is the club that the first live stand-up comedy show I ever been to was here. One of the first times I ever got on stage was at this place. Now, your boy. It's all full circle. I'm so
Mikey,
excited.
this is huge. I'm really pumped up for you. That is an awesome show this weekend. And Big J, like, how can you do better than a weekend show with Big J?
Yeah, man, he's so awesome, dude. And it all started with freaking Kill Tony, dude. I literally, Big J, I listened to the show, then Big J would come be a host. And so I'd be like, yo, I'm signing up for Big J. And I've been picked twice. And then the second time, he was there for 2 weeks. I got up the first week, and the second week I didn't get up. I was just hanging out at the Comedy Store, and he came up to me. It was like, you're funny. I watch your clips online. If you ever need help for vouching, I'm here for you. And I was like, whoa. I was like, I listen to your podcast. So basically, when you're pursuing a thing and one of the pros, one of your idols, they recognize you, recognition. You know what I mean? It's like this is what we've been wanting so much. And so like, I'm thrilled. So every time he comes out here, I hit him up. I'm like, Jay, let me open for you. And then finally the Ontario Improv, I was like, this is my hometown. I was like, hey, can I do a guest spot? And he's like, hey, you want to host? And I was like, yes, absolutely. I could be there all weekend if I get to host. And so I am so grateful. I'm so thrilled. This is like the first, like, it's like the first legitimate gig of being like a headliner, you know? So
I see.
So your value, towards the industry, like out, social media value, I like to say, I'm so happy.
I can't wait for these the YouTube videos to go up of this experience now, Mike.
See, that's the thing too. I'm like, man, I'm so stoked because it's like, Jay, thank you so much. Oh man, I got so many questions I want to ask you. But then I'm like, can you be in my vlog? That's like the biggest one. I'm like, can you? I'm like, so I'm like gonna probably do the whole weekend, and I'll probably do like the last show. I'll be like, Jay, would you just please come talk on the camera a little bit?
Yeah, just give me a little bit, just a little something.
Yeah.
I might have been there for that Kill Tony night that you got picked and went up. I remember him being on the panel and you going up. So I might have been there, Mikey.
There was two of them. I think it was No, I forget who he was because there was two of them the second time. I can't remember, but it was so freaking awesome. The first time I went up, it was Big J and Ari. And then supposedly I got a message from somebody and they're like, hey, Adam wants to see you go up at the Comedy Store because Ari recommended you. So I went up and got to do for Adam, and he didn't say anything to me afterwards. That's why people are like, dude, how come you didn't do anything? I'm like, yo, I got to look. Okay.
I shot my shot.
I don't brag about that. Okay. So, you don't brag about the no thanks. And then, so I went up to Ari afterwards, Ari Shafir, and I was like, hey man, thanks for like putting my name in. He's like, that wasn't me. I'm like, all right, whatever, dude. I'm not going to go talk to Adam and be like, hey, sorry, it wasn't Ari Shafir who said this.
Well, go see Mikey and stick around for Big J if you really want to this weekend, everybody. Mikey, I conclude every interview with the Rotten Tomatoes head-to-head movie game. Okay. I want to play with you. And I know you're a big hockey fan, so this edition is movies that are hockey-themed in some way, shape, or form. Now,
you want me to name them all?
Well, I looked them up. There's really not that many. I had to do a little bit of digging for these movies. Well, there's a few ways you can score points. Number one way, I'm going to read you the description of the movie, and when you think you know it, you yell it out. You can score a point that way. And then when I put these two movies head to head, you got to guess which one has the higher Rotten Tomatoes score. That'll get you a point as well. We got 3 matchups.
This is excellent.
I'm going to start the description. You yell it out when you think you know the title to this movie. Okay, here we go. Movie number 1. A coach brings a unique and brash style to the ice after assembling a team of hot-headed college all-stars who are humiliated in an early match. He unites his squad against a common foe. The U.S. team tries to overcome insurmountable odds and in the process becomes a microcosm for
Mighty
American
Ducks D3.
patriotism. What is it?
Mighty Ducks D3.
The movie is from 2004. Miracle, Mikey.
Oh my God.
Mikey. Well,
oh my God. I can't believe I didn't get that.
I thought you were going to jump in.
I almost auditioned for that movie.
You almost auditioned?
I can't believe because the second you said coach and college kids, I thought of the high school kids. They were high schools. They were
yeah, that's true. Yeah,
that's where I made that mistake. Kurt Russell, come on.
Kurt Russell, 70s.
Herb Brooks,
Weird Al Michaels.
Do you believe in miracles? Yes. And I'll never forget the Aerosmith movie trailer. Yeah, my dad, he had a client whose son was his name is Nathan West. He was actually Jan in Bring It On, and then he played Ryan Callahan in the movie. So
wow,
it was like, because my dad's like, oh, I got a son who played hockey and wants to be an actor, and he's like, well, I got a son, and he's like, wow.
You could have been a consultant on that.
What's up?
You could have been a consultant on that at the very least.
Yeah, so I'm very embarrassed I missed that one.
All right, well, don't feel bad. Movie number 2. Yell it out when you think you know it. An international competition for junior league hockey teams is being held in Los Angeles. Reuniting an old team, the teen misfits are lured by fame. But
D2.
eventually, from 1994, the movie is D2, The Mighty Ducks. You got it.
See, I knew that one. Jeez.
You're on the board, Mikey.
It's so funny because I was like, wow, you're gonna do a Mighty Ducks one right away. That's so easy. I can't believe that.
I waited till the second one. I have some vague integrity. All right, your movies are Miracle versus D2. Which one has the higher Rotten Tomatoes score? What's going through your head?
Dang, that one's good because Miracle is actually a really, really good movie. So I would think that's the more critically acclaimed one. But D2 is so old that it was like before Rotten Tomatoes was existed. So the nostalgia could be a very high.
Big nostalgia factor on those Mighty Ducks series. I forget a lot of people's sports movie knowledge starts with D2, The Sandlot. Mm-hmm. To me, those are kids movies, but like that's where it starts. Like for me, it was, Necessary Roughness, or it was some silly 90s sports movie like The Program. I was like, that's where my sports movie started. The very first Rocky movie I ever saw was Rocky 4. So it's very generational. D2 has a lot of nostalgia following.
So I'm going to go just because I'm thinking of that, but I do think the answer is Miracle, but I'm going to go with D2 because of the nostalgia factor.
Here are the scores. Miracle, 81%. D2, 21%. Mikey, you got 1 point in that round. 21% on the... I'm going to blame that on the critics. This is the critics score.
See, that's what's so funny because... Oh yeah, right. I forget that there's an audience score. All right. Well, there is no nostalgia factor on Rotten Tomatoes.
Well, you're on the board. You got 1 point. You got two more matchups to go.
Man, these are my freaking. Yeah, but I said it too. I was like, it's probably going to be Miracle, but I just want to guess.
Yeah, you talked yourself out of it.
I'm dreaming of the nostalgia factor.
You went against comedy rule number 37. Is your first instinct is always right.
I'm so sentimental. You're so right. I'm glad you brought that up.
All right, round number 2. Yell it out when you know it. A stuck-up figure skating whiz is denied the gold after a fall. Her coach must quickly... What is it? Youngbloods. That's a hockey movie?
Was I wrong?
You're wrong. The movie is from 1992, The Cutting Edge.
That's what it is. Damn it.
Youngblood. Isn't Youngbloods a Western, Mikey? Am I remembering right?
No, Rob Lowe?
Oh, you're thinking, what is that movie?
It's got the ice skaters.
Where Rob Lowe is ice skating, but they never show him ice skating. They just show his feet. Yeah, why didn't that movie come up on my research?
I don't know, man, but I was like, it's that one, and then it's like Cutting Edge is the other one I couldn't get.
Pretty weird movie, putting hockey player with figure skater.
It's so funny because
Young Blood. Oh wait, you said Young Blood. I think you said Young Bloods. Maybe that was what confused me.
I said Young Bloods.
It's
Young Blood, right?
Young Blood. Yeah, from 1986.
See, 86. I know. See, it's funny because one of my favorite hockey movies, I'm like waiting for that to come up, and then I'm like, yeah, I know that one.
Oh, you've got it chambered. All right. Well, stay tuned. You might be guessing it. Okay, next movie. In a small New England town, the local mill is about to lay off 10,000 workers, and the local hockey team is doing no better. The exasperated coach from 1977, Slapshot. You got it right. Another point for you, Mikey.
See, now all my hockey fans, or all your hockey fans who are listening to this, are like, "Oh, thank God," because this guy, this whole podcast he's been talking about, full of crap.
What if I did the Rotten Tomatoes movie game and I didn't have Slapshot in it? That would be embarrassing.
They might get on you, but at the same time, though, you're like, hey, this is a veteran movie trivia question, guy. Okay. It's like Slapshot's too easy.
Too easy? That's true. I could have went that way. All right. Your movies are The Cutting Edge versus Slapshot. Which one has the higher Rotten Tomatoes score?
Slapshot.
You go on Slapshot. Final answer?
Final answer.
The Cutting Edge, 57% on Rotten Tomatoes. Slapshot, 83%. Mikey, you are correct. See, 3 points.
It's a cult classic. It's like people are nostalgic for old hockey movie, but it's movies literally like you have to like them. Like you have to like all of it, not just like the hockey aspect of it. You got to like all of it. So that's why Slapshot, I definitely do that one because it's a cult classic in general.
Yeah, very, very good definition of the cult classic. Paul Newman with gray hair skating around. 70s. People
Mhm.
forget 70s was a very weird era for
Yeah.
movies.
Oh
Maybe
my
we'll
gosh.
think the same way about the 90s, but you watch 70s movies now, you're like, this passes for story?
Yeah. Hilarious. Also, I was like, wow, there was no budgets in any of these movies, were there?
There was no budgets and everybody was racist. Final matchup, Mikey, going into the third period. Movie description, yell it out when you know it. A former fireman takes on a group of terrorists holding the vice president hostage during the seventh game of
Hilarious.
the NHL
Still
Stanley
not
Cup
my
final.
favorite movie, but sudden death.
From 1995, the movie is Sudden Death with the one and only Jean-Claude Van Damme. Pretty good movie. I remember I saw this movie in the
Excellent
theaters.
movie,
I liked it.
man. Yeah, well, when I was growing up, one of my favorite hockey players was Luke Robitaille. And so we knew Luke Robitaille was going to be in that movie. So we were like, oh, we can't wait for this to come out. So we were like so hyped about it. And yeah, dude, when he goes and he's plays the goalie, man.
He ends up being he pulls the Naked Gun. That's Enrique Palazzo, where he's the guy, and then he takes the mask off, and it's Jean-Claude. There's a lot of things going on in that movie. We got a super evil villain. We've got a whole entire hockey game going on amidst the actual story. We got Jean-Claude Van Damme is a good guy. He's a fireman.
Yeah, and also there's like the dad kid, like
right. That's
storyline
true
too as well, man.
Oh, that's right. Isn't it there's something where he tells the son to stay in the seat?
Yeah.
And the arena's burning down or something,
Yeah.
and the son stays put. He's like, my dad told me to stay in the seat.
They just don't make them like they do anymore, man. I really wish they would write original movies again, because you have to give them chances.
And I wouldn't be offended if Jean-Claude Van Damme was in some more movies too.
No way. Nostalgia factor.
Next movie. A reckless young lawyer gets arrested for drunk driving.
Mighty Ducks.
From 1992. The movie is The Mighty Ducks, the original. 5 points, Mikey. You have 5 points going into the final matchup. Your matchup is Sudden Death versus The Mighty Ducks.
Sudden Death.
Sudden Death. Sudden Death. 50% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Nope.
The Mighty Ducks. 21%. You got it. You total of 6 points. Isn't it weird that Mighty Ducks and D2 are both 21%?
See, it's so funny too, because I mean, like, I don't know. I'd have to watch the movies again as like a film critic, just to watch it where it's like plot, story, character development, blah, blah, blah. To me, it's like, yeah, it all seems like they have that, because it's like, yeah, they have that, it's like, if they all have that, it's like, that's a fine movie. Why does it suck so bad? And I think it's like there's the negative nostalgia factor, I guess, on those. So
yeah, I think it's maybe some snobby critics factoring in. It's a
100%.
kid's movie.
Yes.
Where do you stand? Which is the better movie, D1 or D2?
D1.
Oh, really? D1
Yes,
all the
original.
way?
Yes, original. For sure.
D1. I did like how D2 they go international and they get some kids from the inner city in LA, and there's a little bit of
D2 is a lot of fun, because then we see the Mighty Ducks actual logo created.
That's true. This movie created a whole hockey team.
Yeah, it's so funny too, because I follow the Ducks. They're my hockey team. And a couple years ago, I forget how many years ago this was, Sports Illustrated named Wild Wing the #1 mascot all sports. But this is only because Gritty has showed up now, and that's like now there's Gritty. You've seen Gritty, right, for the Flyers? He's like,
no, I don't know that. Oh yeah, okay.
Yeah, I'll say it's like I can just tell it to you. You've seen this guy.
Yes.
But it's like, so you think about, and it's so funny because, the Ducks have changed their identity since they've been sold from Disney. But now, like, the fan base, they all want that old logo and those colors back so bad.
Yeah.
And it's like Wild Wing. So like Disney created basically like Wild Wing and the logo. And it's like, yeah, the logo's so great because it's Disney. And then it's like, yeah, a character. It's like, this is Disney's thing. They've theme parks. It's like, of course, Wild Wings is one of the best mascots in sports. So
who does it better than Disney as far as creating characters?
I mean, when you think about like a mass character like that, you know what I mean? I truly can't think of anybody else, because that's their lifeblood. Because you can think about like, oh, you're a good character. Like, oh, you won't mess with like rowdy kids and stuff. But like seeing like sick kids come up to, the characters, how they react to them, like you've seen like the the deaf ones, like the characters doing deaf hand signals. So it's like Disney's always been about the magic, so their characters, like that's like they're one of their number one. Like I remember even we took my nephew when he was like 4 years old, like 5 years old. And there's this one Donald who just was so awesome with my nephew and like grabbed him and like pushed his like cheeks back to make him smile. And you're just like, and I'm like, dude, I'm a veteran of this park. And I was like, that was freaking great. That right there is called the magic. I love it.
That right there was magic. And
that's the magic. Told everybody, magic. You guys see the magic? It's worth all the freaking money, Disney.
Well, Mikey Mckernan, you scored 6 points in the Rotten Tomatoes head-to-head game. We talked about early stand-up, your love of Jim Carrey. We talked about a big family. We talked hockey.
Yes.
You can see Mikey's video blog up on his YouTube right now, and you can see him this weekend at the Ontario Improv, hosting for Big J Orkerson. Mikey, this has been awesome catching up.
Patrick P. Ramey, so good to see you, pal. Can't
You
wait
too.
to see you out there. Thank you
I'll
so
see
much
you
for
around
having me on.
soon.
This was a great conversation, very articulate. Hopefully I didn't ramble too much. I wanted to sound as smart as you.
Don't worry, we'll cut all that last part out.
Great.
All right, that is the episode. That is the interview for this week. How about that? Mikey Mckernan. What an interview. What a guy. Deep conversation there. We figured out a lot. Awesome to talk with him. He's doing stand-up all over, so go check him out, see him live, see what he's all about. And how about that Rotten Tomatoes head-to-head movie game? How'd you do? Did you score a perfect score? Did you go 0? Did you not get a single one right? I don't know. I think Mikey did pretty good for the Rotten Tomatoes movie game. Hey, keep checking in. We have more interviews on deck for Running It Back. So stay tuned. Subscribe to the channel if you have not already. Tell your friends. And if you're new to the channel, go back and check out some of the old interviews as well, because there are some good ones in there. I always enjoy doing them, and I especially thank you for listening too. So, for myself, Patrick Ramirez, and for my guest, Mikey Mckernan, we will see you next time.